Welcome back, learners, and let's continue with our square roots. So let us look at the square root of 64. Again, we know that 64 comes from 8 multiplied by 8. So that is the square root of 8 squared. And our answer there is an 8. That is the positive square root of 64. But if we are asked for the negative square root of 64, that means they are looking for the negative square root of 8 multiplied by 8. That is the negative square root of 8 squared, and our answer here will be a negative 8. I hope you can remember that, and I hope that is easy for you to understand. Let's continue with our cube numbers. So when I am looking at 4 cubed, this is 4 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 4, and my answer there is 64. What about if I am asked for a negative 4 cubed? This means that we are going to take negative 4 and we are going to multiply it by itself twice. So this is negative 4 multiplied by negative 4 multiplied by negative 4. Now, if you are multiplying 3 numbers, it is best for you to start with the first 2 numbers and then move on to the last number. So I am going to now here say negative 4 multiplied by negative 4. So 2 negatives give us a positive 16. And then we are going to multiply that by the last negative 4 there. But now we have a positive number multiplied by a negative number. And we know there that the answer is going to be negative. So this means that negative 4 cubed is going to be negative 64. What about if I have 5 cubed? So 5 cubed is going to be 5 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 5. And that gives me 125. What about if I have negative 5 cubed? That is going to be negative 5 multiplied by negative 5 multiplied by a negative 5. Again, you are going to start with the first 2. A negative and a negative is going to give us a positive answer. So that is going to be a positive 25 multiplied by the negative 5. And our answer there is going to be a negative 125. So negative 5 cubed is going to be negative 125. So when we're looking at cube numbers, now cube numbers can either be positive or negative. So we are multiplying 3 numbers here. You are going to multiply the first 2 numbers, then multiply the third number. And then your answer there, if you are dealing with a negative number, your answer is going to be a negative. And then if you are cubing a positive answer, then your answer is going to be a positive. Let's look at the cube roots. So the cube root of 64 is, 64 comes from 4 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 4. And that will give us the cube root of 4 cubed. And our answer there is going to be a 4. So when we look at the cube root of negative 64, that is the cube root of negative 4 multiplied by negative 4 multiplied by negative 4. And the answer there is negative 4. Let's move on to the next one. We have there the cube root of 125. So we know that 125 comes from 5 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 5. That is the cube root of 5 cubed, and our answer there is going to be 5. And the next one is the cube root of a negative 125. That is the cube root of negative 5 multiplied by negative 5 multiplied by a negative 5. And our answer there is a negative 5. Okay, so this means that positive cube numbers have positive cube roots, and negative cube numbers have negative cube roots, as you can see in the calculations that we have done. Let's look at the next part of our lesson, which is properties of integers, where we are going to be looking at the multiplicative inverse first. So the multiplicative inverse property, That is, the multiplicative inverse, or the reciprocal, applies to multiplication and division. It refers to the number that must be multiplied to another number to get a positive 1. We can get 1 if we multiply with a number's reciprocal, that is, its upside down version. Let's look at an example. The multiplicative inverse of a positive 3. So, we know that if we want to represent positive 3 as a fraction, will be 3 divided by 1, because any number divided by 1 is itself, except for 0, of course. So 3 divided by 1 multiplied by 1/3 is going to give us 1. So to get a positive 1, the numbers must both be positive or both be negative. So because here we have a positive 3, that means we are going to multiply by its positive reciprocal, which is going to be a positive 1/3. That is why 3 multiplied by 1/3 gives us 1. Then we have the multiplicative inverse of a negative 5 halves. So if I have 5 halves, what do you think the reciprocal of that will be? Because I have a negative 5 halves, that means the reciprocal must also be negative. And then what is the upside down version, or the reciprocal of 5 halves? Yes, you are correct. It is 2/5. And if I say negative there. If I say negative 5 halves multiplied by negative 2/5, that will give me a positive 1. That means that the multiplicative inverse of a negative 5 halves is a negative 2/5. Okay, let's look at now the commutative property of integers. So 5 multiplied by 8 we know can be represented again as 8 multiplied by 5, and that gives us 40. So what about if we are dealing with negative numbers as well? If I have a negative 5 multiplied by 8, I can also say 8 multiplied by a negative 5. And you see how I'm using brackets to avoid confusion, and that will be still a positive number multiplied by a negative number, which will give me a negative 40. So if I am again dealing with 5 multiplied by a negative 8, positive and a negative, that is going to give me a negative 40. So this is the commutative. We can swap them around. And here we have a negative and a negative. So a negative 5 multiplied by a negative 8, and that is going to give you a positive 40. Let's look at the associative property of integers. And remember, associative means we can group them together to make the calculation easier for ourselves. So there I have 3 times 2 times negative 7. And that we can start off by saying 3 times 2, which we know is 6. And we can later on multiply that negative 7, which is going to give us a positive number and a negative number. It's going to give us a negative result. And 6 times 7 is 42. But remember, because we are working with associative, this is also equals to that 3 multiplied by, we could have done the 2 multiplied by the negative 7 first. So that is multiplied by a negative 14. The answer will still be a negative 42. The same for if we have more negative numbers, that will be, so we can say there, we can start with the negative 3 multiplied by the 2. So a negative 3 multiplied by 2 will give us a negative 6. And we are going to multiply that negative 7. And a negative multiplied by a negative will give us a positive answer. And 6 times 7 is 42. So our answer will be a positive 42. The same could have been if you had said that, if you had decided to group the 2 and the negative 7 together. So that would have been the negative 3 multiplied by the negative 14, which still gives us an answer of a positive 42. Lastly, let's look at the distributive property of integers. Now, remember, to distribute means we are going to multiply the number that is outside of the bracket with the numbers that are inside. So here we have 4, open bracket, 3 minus 7, close bracket. So how are we going to distribute that? We are going to say a positive 4 multiplied by a positive 3. That will give us a positive 12. And then we are going to say minus, because we are subtracting there inside the bracket, and we are going to say a positive 4 multiplied by a positive 7, and that is going to give us a positive 28. But now we are going to say 12 minus 28. We can see that we are subtracting a big number from a small number. That is going to give us a negative answer, and the answer there is going to be a negative 16. And then lastly, we have negative 6, open bracket, 11 minus 5, close bracket. We can distribute that and say a negative 6 multiplied by a positive 11. That will give us a negative 66. And then we are going to say a negative 6. I'm just going to put the minus there because we are subtracting. We are going to say a negative 6 multiplied by a positive 5. And that is going to give us there a negative 30. So now I have negative 66 minus a negative 30. Remember, if we are subtracting a negative number, it is the same as adding its additive inverse. So this is going to be negative 66 plus 30. And our answer there is going to be a negative 36. That's all we have for today's lesson. Thank you for joining me, and I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.